there's a passing on. There's an ancient way.
Mm-hmm.
And those who have found that ancient way, or let's say the narrow road, those who have traveled the narrow road can be guides to those who want to.
Right.
And so that whole idea of generationally and why this rebellion is so important is we've lost the generational edge. It's just been stolen. With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoweh's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast. Michael Thompson, S.J. Jennings. We're in the same clothes as last week as we step into part two of a two-part series on the rebellion for men.
Yeah, I like this shirt. I don't mind wearing it 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, this one got out without Robin seeing me, and she's seen me since I've been out.
Yeah,
and
she thought, banded collar.
I love it.
It's old school, man.
I know, man. It's coming back. You feel it.
No, I get it.
It looks like a
great shirt. It does. Yes.
So, anyway,
fit right in the movie Knight's Tale or something.
Yeah, man.
Like that.
Yeah. I put the armor right over it. So, but we are on part two of a series that we're talking about rebellion, reformation, right? Redemption and freedom, kind of this sequence of important things. And last week we talked about the American Revolution, the French Revolution.
Yeah, and there's certainly more of them. We touched on the Civil Rights movement. You and Keith went into a couple weeks ago.
So appreciate
listen
him.
to that episode if you haven't.
And then we talked about Martin Luther,
right.
On the Great Reformation.
That's right. Yeah.
And so all of those having these common things that we want to just bring over into this session. So if you missed the first part, that's a quick recap, but you may want to dive in because I think we did a decent job of looking at all the ingredients across the landscape. And
set the table.
Yeah.
As it were.
The part that has given us some hope, gotten us excited, we spent a lot of time talking and diagramming and whiteboarding here at Zoweh about kind of a masculine reformation, which would require a rebellion of sorts against an established oppressing kingdom, the kingdom of darkness, that has way too many men, most men, not playing their part in the kingdom, not playing their part as God intended, not playing their part as men. And we were talking earlier today with some guys about the process of healing and training and validation and initiation, and how it's going to take oriented men to see this comeback happen, this recovery really, really take place. And most of us doing it, like we said in the previous episode, from a place of we heard it. We've actually started sensing that it exists, but we didn't really know that it's been missing,
right?
Until we have felt in our own masculine journeys the lack, the inadequacy, the diminishment, and yes, our wills matter, and we do have something to offer. But if that is so compromised and so bound up in a false self, as Paul says, the flesh, the false self system, brothers don't stand a chance.
No. I mean, when you're in prison, you even if you get to go outside or have a rec yard or you're not breathing the free air. Yeah. I mean, you're still captive.
Yeah. What does Shawshank call it? Institutionalized?
Yeah.
Red says
first you these walls scare you.
Yeah.
Then you resent them. Then you get to grow to need them.
Yeah.
And even love them.
And you decorate them.
Mm-hmm.
You put your posters up.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. And so it's still prison, right? In the Matrix, the Morpheus says to Neo, a prison for your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so there's just a lot of that institutionalization
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, cuts across many, many boundaries. And in the spiritual boundaries, in the spiritual space, that's what I want to just kind of zero in on.
Yeah.
Because black, white, any of the races, any economic, this is prevalent across all classes, all sexes.
You're subject to it whether you acknowledge it or not.
Yeah, this is a bigger system that are, and so we were talking about the reformer Martin Luther and the colonists, the colonials who were bringing a rebellion that led to this independent, you know, we're going to be our own country, you know, and so I want to talk about for a few minutes just Jesus as a great rebel of his day. I've said this quote before. Philip Yancey wrote in his book, The Jesus I Never Knew, because he's discovering the real Jesus. Reminds me of John Eldridge's book, Beautiful Outlaw. He says, you don't crucify Mr. Rogers or Captain Kangaroo.
Right.
All right. How does that land on you? Have you heard that before, Caleb? You heard me say that before? Me, or did you read that before?
No, I've heard you.
You've heard me say it before. Okay.
I would say, you know, and maybe it's obvious, but Captain Kangaroo and Mr. Rogers are not a threat to anybody. They are operating in their own kingdoms, and they have some power and authority, but it's over children. It's you know, do you feel loved and heard and seen, which is some of what Jesus brought to the table, continues to bring to the table. But the other things that Jesus brought were threats to the establishment.
Yeah.
And when you become a threat to the establishment, you often end up on the chopping block, unfortunately.
I mean, how in the world can one dude, calling Jesus a dude, I know, but how can one man tick off both the Jewish establishment and the Roman establishment when they hate each other?
Right.
But they actually come together to in both of their agendas. We got to get rid of this guy. Well, we want to get rid of this guy too. And that's why you don't crucify Mr. Rogers.
Yeah.
You know, though I've loved looking back at some of the reality of Mr. Rogers used his platform in ways to
powerful ways.
And powerful ways to communicate very important things to children, whether handicapped or I think of the little kid that he brings in on the wheelchair, you know, just to validate him.
Right.
You know, in a culture that, you know, wasn't as kind to those who
back then
who were handicapped, different. Yeah. And then in other spaces. And
I just saw an interview with him. Charlie Rose. Do you remember Charlie Rose? He had an interview show on PBS.
Yeah.
So he's interviewing Mr. Rogers, and he says, you know, what would you say about the thousands of kids whose life you impacted over the years? And he said, I don't care about the thousands of kids that I impacted, as long as I impacted one.
Yeah.
You know, he just wanted to make a difference in the kids' lives, which is very Christ-like, you know, and make sure that they're seen and make sure that they're heard and that their feelings are validated, right? Yeah. Whatever those feelings are.
Great words. I mean, you know, for his
so much of Jesus in that.
Yes. Thanks for saying that, because it's time to say that.
However,
that you know, even Fred Rogers though was a bit of a rebellious in his, nobody was doing, you know, what he was doing, and he had some agendas that he wanted.
That's true.
He was passionate about the care for, you know, children. So Jesus was passionate.
The underrepresented.
You remember what Jesus said? If you harm one of these, it'd be better for you to be thrown overboard with a millstone around your neck. So here's this advocate. Here's this person speaking for those who need a spokesperson. And so Jesus does that in so many important ways.
And it's a rebellious act. So that's really interesting. I'm just thinking about this now. We hadn't talked about this. But, Jesus was rebellious against Rome, like we talked about. He was called the king of the Jews. That ticked them off.
Even though he says, give unto Caesar what's Caesar's. I mean, he brings...
And he even says that's what you call me.
Yeah. But he pays the taxes.
Yep.
He has Peter catch the fish.
He ticks off the religious establishment, healing on the Sabbath day, other things he does. And I think about what we were just talking about with Fred Rogers, I don't even know Captain Kangaroo's real name, Mr. Green Jeans, all that deal. But that's a rebellion in the sense of it's a rebellion against what could be considered probably the lightest way to say it, the kindest way to say it would be the passivity of the general population towards people who are underrepresented. So he's rebelling against that. The people. So Jesus rebels against Rome. He rebels against the religious establishment and even against the people who are so either imprisoned or enslaved or they're blinded by their own prejudices and avarice towards others. That he's rebellious against those folks too and says, you need to do something different here.
One of the most hideous forms of oppression is that disguised as good. So religious oppression is a brutal kind of oppression because it's so masked and so disguised. And so I think it was part of Hitler's scheme and ability to gather is it just became a religion of the state.
Yeah, sure.
And so it was a faith and a belief system. And we've said this all the time, what you believe matters. It has authority in your life. And so moving back to Jesus, we can't talk about him, I think, today without at least referencing for a moment The Chosen. Here we are. Are we in season 5 or 4?
I think they're filming 5.
Yeah, so we're actively right now. Waiting.
Yeah.
And yet it's close, I think, to deliver in season 4. And it just gets worse for him. As he goes, I think about our book tours, 18 book tours. We were adding it up, almost 3,000 books and 3,000 some people.
Yeah.
So Jesus is moving around the countryside doing what we see him doing in the first 2 seasons, but he really gets on the map at the Sermon on the Mount.
Yep.
Like, it's one thing to do these stops and gather people in houses or synagogues. He gets run out of the synagogues, and people are tearing off the roofs at certain houses to get their friends there. But the popularity of Jesus as he does his tour, becomes right according to his plan, but becomes really the beginning of the manhunt for how do we get him? How do we catch him?
Yeah, well, when you've got, 50, 10, 15, 50, 100 people gathered together, but then you gather 5,000.
5,000 men.
Yes, that's right. And just the men were 5,000. That's right. So, then you start to get people's attention. You're starting to threaten their livelihood and their belief systems. And, people in power don't like that. Yeah.
So, whether in some lowercase words, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, this is the spiritual revolution. The first coming is the spiritual revolution where Jesus comes to, he says, establish his kingdom.
Right.
Through the line, we just had Christmas, through the line of David.
Yep.
The Davidic covenant and all of that. So I think that it's just powerful to think about how this has to happen. I mean, the first reformer clearly is Jesus. Martin Luther brings in and ushers in a theology of grace, over works. And here we are, 500 years later. So 1,500 years, 500 years later, there's something that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. Is it just me, or did you notice in The Chosen, as you watch the character, or the man who's playing the character of Jesus, I feel because we know what's coming, right? Yeah. He knows what's coming.
We read the script.
We've read the script, right. Yeah. But you just watch him, I can sense like the weight of it coming on him more and more as I watch it.
Yeah.
More and more.
And the disciples are, they wear it on their the actors, the who they're portraying. They're wearing more the concern, the heaviness. Yeah. And so I think it's a brilliant invitation to see he wasn't the nicest guy. That's not how he was seen, though he was kind. He carried with him a strength. And so this rebellion that Jesus was at the point of was to, among many things, but maybe one of the most significant things, was to overturn the establishment of the kingdom of darkness, the works mentality, to bring God close.
Yeah, in all the ways that it had manifested.
Max Lucado wrote a book I read years ago, No Wonder They Called Him the Savior and God Came Near. I'm talking about in the 80s, early 90s. He's got to be 90 years old. But
he's got 90-something books, I think.
I know.
Yeah.
So anyway, but that whole God came near and just the significance of what Jesus did when he invaded. Yancey again calls it the Great Invasion. C.S. Lewis talks about it like that too, as God, breaking through and coming in to dwell among us was the Great Invasion, to establish or reestablish, if you will, his kingdom and authority. Yes, the cross, yes, forgiveness of sins, but even more than that is his kingdom, which he talked the most about, and his authority as the Savior, as the King of Kings, as the Prince of Peace. So let's transition to really what we're experiencing and where God's taking us in Zoweh. We've been seeing this for a while, that there's lots of oppression in the world and many forms of it. But again, one of the sinister ones is the one you don't know. Yeah. The one that you don't see, the one that you don't feel is happening. And so when we're talking about men, the sensitive subject of a rebellion for men, we really are talking, SJ, about what if men could live more free from the false self that resides and is at work within them, and in intimacy with the King of Kings, in intimacy with their Father, in intimacy with the Holy Spirit. What might those men look like?
If they could do that?
Yes, if there was dozens, if there was thousands, if there was millions of them, what would it look like? What would men, kings in the king stage, as we look at the book King Me, right? There's boys, there's explorers, there's warriors, lovers, kings, these 40s, 50s, and 60-year-olds. And they're kings because it's in that time period, 40s, 50s, and 60-year-old, that stage of life, when you do have usually some level of power and authority. Not everybody, but most guys have some level of power and authority at that stage. And how are you using it? How are you wielding it? Is it for yourself? That's how the kings of the Old Testament, the separation between good kings and bad kings was good kings.
Yeah.
A few of them walked intimately with God, and bad kings tried to protect and provide and negotiate for themselves. So we've been working on this for a while, and one of the generational marks that we felt like was significant was, what if older men who have been walking with God for a while had something to offer the generations of men below them? And so that's where the Elder Sage Initiative started 18 months ago, almost 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We started, and finally we get to I feel like we've been working on a rocket for a couple of years.
We're going to test fire it.
Now we're going to get to fire. But I would love to, because I think the opening of this first session of the Elder Sage Initiative, the video series, if you want to cue it up, I'd love to show our friends these first few minutes of, we talk about the problem in masculinity, and we talk about a possible part of the solution as the Elder Sage Initiative. And then I want to talk a little bit more about what are our plans and hopes. Use that word. What's our hopes for masculinity, for our friends and allies, and those who are yet to be friends and allies in this great war over the hearts of men and women.
So before I do that, though, I want to just bring something to light and ask you a question. So when I found Zoweh in 2009, Zoweh's mission and focus was that king stage of masculinity. Typically, after it didn't take long, I went to every event Zoweh put on, and then I joined the team. You see the men in the seats. They're in that age range, 38 maybe, 35. Upper 30s to 60s and even 70s. And for years, that's kind of where the focus was on that bracket of men. Yeah. And then something shifted, and we're looking at things more generationally now. Can you just talk about that for a minute? Like what that shift was before, and I'll get this ready to go.
Yeah, it's funny, man. Singing a song long enough, you get a shot at another generation. So, so I mean, no doubt, filling the PNC Arena here in Raleigh was Journey. Right. Not too long ago, a band that we grew up with. In the '80s, and yet the demographic of the ticket sales is not all 50-year-olds going to Journey. Oh yeah. My 25-year-old Abby, she loves 70s and 80s rock. Nice. She loves a lot of kind of music, but we have a game that we play, kind of a guess this one, and we'll play these hits from, and if you can name the artist and you can name it's
August of 1976.
If you can name the artist and if you can name the title, it's $1. Okay. And I love giving her money. Great. For that reason of that game that we play. But so to answer your question, I think we've been singing the song long enough, for almost 2 decades, that now we're starting to see men who were in their 30s, and come through their 40s and join us in your 40s and now into 50. And I just want to, and you bringing your son, Stephen, into that space, and you bringing all your friends, give or take 5 years, 6 years. I know when you were in the pastorate role in Goldsboro, you brought a lot of men. But that's how we're starting to see, and in our own stories and our own journeys are actually manifesting some of this reality that, in our 40s and 50s, we're in this stage, but how many times have we said, I wish I would have gotten this earlier? Oh, man. I don't know, SJ, if I would have listened, if I would have had my wits about me. And yet there are certain men, like some that are even on our Elder Sage team, Wendell Deo, who was in my life as a spiritual leader at the time. I might have listened to him had he, and now he's with us. Had he imparted it. Had he imparted that generationally. Sure. So he was a king when I was a warrior, and he was leading the charge in the ministry that we were a part of at the time. And he had a huge influence on my life generationally. Respect him now. And so
it's kind of like if you're a football player and Vince Lombardi wants to say, "Hey, can I tell you a little bit about football?"
So it's funny you said that. I'm watching Hard Knocks with Abby.
Oh, in season Hard Knocks.
So we're
Dolphins.
We're both Lions fans and Dolphin fans, which both are kind of resurrecting.
Yeah.
Anyway, and they're in the locker room, and when Miami just it's a couple weeks
beat Dallas.
Yeah.
Recently. Yeah.
No, this was
it the Dallas game?
I don't know if it might have been before that.
Because Hard Knocks is
a couple weeks delayed.
That's right.
I think it was the Raiders, and they had a hard time with them. Anyway, they win, and in the locker room is Marino.
No kidding.
Dan Marino's around, and he's on the practice field at another time. But then I saw him in the locker room. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
To your question, when the veterans keep showing up now, they're not playing anymore, but they played. How did they play? What was their contribution? So in the spiritual realm, there's a huge kingdom principle about older men, elders, and the way that they should be living. And then Paul talks about the warriors, the young men. He says fathers and sons and young men, and certain ways to behave and certain ways to respect one another.
Right.
So
who to listen to.
Yeah, Eldridge was the one who convinced me that masculinity is primarily bestowed by masculinity. And so there's a passing on. There's an ancient way. And those who have found that ancient way, or let's say the narrow road, those who have traveled the narrow road can be guides to those who want to.
Right.
And so that whole idea of generationally and why this rebellion is so important is we've lost the generational edge. It's just been stolen. And it's, again, the worst kind of stealing is not when somebody takes $10 million from you. It's when somebody takes $10,000 a month and you don't even see it.
Right. For the rest of your life.
Because you have 10 million.
Sure.
And there's just, and so parts of masculinity and parts of men's hearts have been taken over time to where we start with such a deficit. Who is there, SJ, in our lives to initiate us in the different stages of masculinity? And how long does it take to say there's no one there? Fathers, grandfathers, and I'm not talking about evil men.
Right.
These are good men, but they don't know how to answer the questions of a masculine heart when that heart is 8 or 9. I get it. They're busy. They're working. I've been that guy. And so to not have been trained up in the ways of the kingdom. Now, I went to Sunday school, bro. We're talking about church. I did a lot of church.
Right.
A lot. But to your question, did my dad and did the men around me, did they intentionally build into my life the things I needed to become a good man, a man who walks with God intimately, a man who knows what the kingdom of darkness is trying to do to him and around him? No.
Yeah, most of the time they gave what they got.
So there's the generational cycle that is really symptomatic.
That's right.
In this.
So that's why it's a rebellion.
That's why it's a rebellion, that it starts with a few that find the path, that experience redemption, that recover the parts of their hearts that were uninitiated, unfathered, unmothered, and turn to God for mothering, fathering, and initiation.
Yeah.
Healing. We just had that talk this morning about healing the brokenness. And when you get healed of certain things, like I had just back to the physical realm, my orthopedic who did my knee, anybody I even smell who needs an orthopedic surgeon, I recommend him.
Yeah.
Because of what he did for me.
Sure.
And the results. And I'm sure he's not perfect. So I haven't looked at his Yelp category. I haven't looked at his stars. But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So when you experience the love of God, the kind that transforms you, heals broken places, fills voids, speaks to you your name, how you're known in heaven, gives you some war names.
Yeah.
The kind of stuff that we do at our encounter weekends that we, SJ, that's what, and why I think the demographic is expanding.
Oh, man.
And the opportunity is in front of us to recruit. I love saying that to certain audiences, like, hey, man, we're not here to sell books. We're here recruiting.
Right. Yeah.
We're looking for the few good men.
In that vein, you talked about your dad and some of the men in your church. I immediately started thinking about my dad. And of course, my dad's passed away a long time ago now, 1994. This February would be 30 years.
Oh, man.
I was starting to say, man, I wish I could talk to him now. I think I'm going to write him a letter and just say, you know what, Dad, I'm not mad. Because I know you gave what you got, and you tried to take what you were given and make it something better.
Yeah.
Than what you got. But there's just an exercise there that I think is a good one to engage in to say, again, I'm not mad, but there's questions I have.
Yeah.
Why certain things didn't happen.
Yeah.
And I want to let this found me. Mm-hmm. And,
I'm okay.
I'm okay.
I'm on my way.
I fully believe had this found my dad when he was 38 years old, it would have been different, Yeah. So the idea of the rebellion is, to me, I don't feel like we've got time to wait for this to find people. Yeah. We got to get it to people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's, Martin Luther wasn't like, well, I'll write these letters and these theses, and maybe someday somebody will find them someday.
No, he was intentional about where he posted it. That was the World Wide Web
of the time.
Of the time. He posted it there. I mean, right below it was buying it, the purchasing or selling of chickens, I'm sure. Or
another taxation notice or something.
And the number of people who could even read it back then.
Right.
That was inhibiting.
Yeah.
But
so just if hopefully we've covered some of the why we're talking about this. But this little excerpt from the Elder Sage Initiative, there's a series of 4 videos. If you go to zoweh.org/Elder Sage, you can check it all out.
They're about 20 minutes.
They're about 20 minutes long, but we want to play you the first
the opening
2-3 minutes of the first one, just so you get a taste of what we're talking about. Yeah. So let's go ahead and play that, and we can kind of listen in and react.
I'm here because I recognize that we have a great, great crisis, and it's across racial lines, ethnicity.
I've been a Christian for 40-some years, but the relationship, the one-on-one relationship of a God who really cares about me and loves me and wants the best for me.
Like, it doesn't do me any good to hear what God has for you. It's a lot better if I can help you hear God for yourself.
Coming here, being an elder sage, it helped and strengthened my relationship with Christ and enabled me to be transparent and telling my story that I didn't even know I had a story.
I don't want to end poorly, I want to leave a legacy for my kids and, the people that God gives me charge of, and this is the vehicle to do that. And it's so biblical. It's so real and so forgotten about and needed.
Welcome to the Elder Sage video series. My name's Michael Thompson. I'm the president of Zoweh and the author of the books The Heart of a Warrior and King Me. When I was writing the most recent book, King Me, a book about loving and leading in a wounding world and the masculine journey that every man is on, I came to this stage, the end stage of the masculine journey called the Elder Sage. God and I began to interact about the significance and the importance of this stage. Because masculinity is bestowed by masculinity, what if there were older men who could step in and play their part and enter into the stories of younger men and help them on their masculine journey. My friends and I, elder sages in my life, have gotten together and recorded 4 conversations that we want to offer to you. Conversations about the challenges that men are facing and the power of validation from God and other men, and why we believe this is so important and want to do this, and invite you to come with us. In this first conversation, we want to explore the challenges that men are facing, the significance of what it is to be a man in these days, and the opportunity for elder sages to step in. Every epic story has an elder sage. They guide, they offer, they encourage, and they challenge the characters in the story to become more, because they've been on that journey themselves. What if your role is waiting for you? I think you're going to like this. What do you think?
I think I'm going to like it.
I've seen that a few times.
Yeah, man. I loved hearing the men at the beginning too.
Yeah.
Who
Dwayne,
Shane, you just hear the cry of his heart. I want to finish well.
Yeah.
I want to leave a legacy for my kids.
Yeah.
Alexander's journey of discovery. I didn't even know I had a story.
Yeah.
Mike D. I love that he's on there. Mike Daniels. He's talks about being a Christian for 4 decades.
Yeah.
And he's just starting to experience the love of God.
Uh-huh. He served God faithfully for years.
Yeah. And I love that Leonard opened with, the idea, this crisis that's amongst us and on us.
Mm-hmm.
It's no respecter of persons.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what culture, what race, what creed you are.
Yeah.
You are impacted by it.
Yeah. We're not the only ones, like Zwingli and Luther. We're not the only ones about this. And also, I would say, it's not that it hasn't been attempted or tried before. It's actually had some pretty good runs in the past with, some different initiatives. And the one that comes to mind, through the early 90s, I was a 20-something, 30 at the time when Promise Keepers was making their impression on masculinity. And we talked about this before. The thing that brought 1 million men to D.C., with Promise Keepers, or I don't know how many they did, 18 or 20-some stadium events. We're talking 20, 25, 30,000 men in major arenas to sign up for encouragement, some exhortation in being a promise keeper.
Yeah.
They had 7 promises. But what I want to say about Promise Keepers, SJ, is that whether you agree or disagree with their philosophy or whatever they were doing, and you could be critical that it didn't survive, well, that's a whole other conversation. The fact is, they impacted not thousands, not tens of or hundreds. They impacted millions of men's lives. They struck a chord in their hearts because there's a chord to be struck in the hearts of men. Like you were saying, there's a hope. And that hope begins to become a murmur. It finds other people, and they start showing up. 5,000 of them, right, on a hillside,
right,
to hear Jesus.
Yeah.
He's already made a little bit of his tour known, and they find him, the Sermon on the Mount. But since the 90s, early 90s, there's another great reformer, a great rebellion that happened in Wild at Heart. You cannot argue with whatever it is now, 15 or is it 18 million copies sold still.
Yeah.
A book released in 99, 2000, is that many copies? It's reaching it's reaching the next generation now. The guys that started, like I did, at 38, 39 years old with Wild at Heart, it's finding new 38 and 39-year-olds.
Right.
You know, people are reading our books, Heart of Warrior and King Me, and finding Wild at Heart and telling me, did you know about this book? Oh yeah. I love this. I heard this one time.
Funny.
I heard this the other day. Eldridge sounds a lot like you.
Yeah.
Don't tell him that. I mean, I borrowed and stole, so much from standing on his shoulders and others who were writing about, the recovery of masculinity. And so I think we're poised for a phenomenal rebellion that leads to the next Reformation in this generation. We haven't seen something really large in a while, but I feel and believe that something large is brewing. Yeah. There are other missions and ministries and teams that are starting to find that colonial Congress when the other states leaders came to the aid of Massachusetts, because that's where the army of the enemy was proficient and prevalent. So I think in this way, like you said, it's no respecters. There's an opportunity to see, this rebellion. And I would say for 2024, friends and allies, we're recruiting. We're recruiting. We would invite you to get a resource like King Me and begin to explore the masculine journey. If you happen to be a feminine heart who's watching this, please go buy copies for your sons, for your husband, for your dad, and maybe even for you, because it translates pretty easily into the feminine heart. And
it gives great insight.
And this is, if we can't do this together, masculine and feminine hearts, if we can't recover what's been lost, and just keep doing religious things or worse, I think this is the chance to push into a battle that we have a great commission. We have a great commission. And it starts with all authority on heaven and earth has now been given to me. And most of what Dallas Willard says is the effect of most men is not wielding power and authority well. Right. And so intimacy with God, being fathered, having a good king, and then having the Holy Spirit guide and counsel you. The Trinity, if you're not experiencing him every day in unique and wonderful and powerful and intimate ways, you might want to check what's behind the posters on your wall.
Yeah, see if it's not stone.
And just see.
And bars.
Yeah. And make sure there's doors you can open and get out of, and into spaces where, you can move freely. So that's the rebellion. Yeah. That's the
rebellion with the hope that it will eventually become a reformation. It's got to start. It's got to start with a rebellion, though.
A rebellion that leads to a revolution that leads to a reformation.
That's right.
And then as Eisenhower said, freedom is not long entrusted to the weak or the timid. General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, knowing that you're going to have to guard it, you're going to have to protect it, you're going to have to do what you can and do what you need to do that it survive. Right. Because until we see him come again, we live in a war. And captive and naive and POW, none of that is any good. And so we need men, particularly men, to rise up and join the growing number of oriented men. You have to be oriented. You've got to know who you are, where you are, and the good God's up to in your life. And that's a whole other podcast from other days that we've done it. Yeah. And why we do these podcasts is to invite men to more. Because with God, there's always more. So
amen to that.
Yeah.
Amen to that. Good stuff, man. Well, if you've got comments, questions, you can leave your comment down below here. You can email us, exploringmore@zoweh.org. we'd love for you to share and comment on the podcast. It helps us be found.
Yeah. I got to say, too, in April,
Mm-hmm.
the end of April is our next
25th to the 28th.
Rebellion Gathering.
It is. Yeah.
The Heart of a Warrior
It's
event.
the Rebel base for you Star Wars fans.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, I just want to mark your calendars now, protect it, come join us. And it's on the website at zoweh.org/events. And there's a seat for you. And if you want to know more and dive in to the waters polluted with tea, the next rebellion.
There's tea in the water.
There's tea in the water. So come join us at the Heart of a Warrior Encounter in April. So thanks, friends and allies, for watching and listening to the Exploring More podcast. We'll see you next time. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoweh.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoweh on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoweh on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.